Good evening. I'm late. This is my third time trying this lecture. Hopefully it works this time. So, three objectives to talk about. The qualities of perfect competition are descriptors of a perfectly competitive market. Understanding profit as a cost, I'll explain. And then understanding what zero economic profit means. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And hopefully number two feeds number three. So to begin with, our qualities of perfect competition are many buyers and sellers, homogeneous product or identical products, no barriers to entry, free entry and exit, and finally, perfect information. And these things all add up to firms being price takers, and that ends up meaning that there's zero economic profit in the long run. So as we go through these, I want to think about agriculture and commodity production and say, does this fit perfect competition? And the answer is yes. When I teach microeconomics, I use commodity production as the example of perfect competition. We just happen to be focused on that, and so it should make it a little bit easier for us. So the first one, many buyers and sellers. There are enough that if any one disappeared, on either side, would not affect the market. So I think that's the one where we can say, check it off, I believe it. The book says it, Tim says it, every other book says it, every economist says it. All right. Homogeneous products. This one might make you scratch your head and say, no, I don't think all products are the same. Different moisture levels, we have organic corn, organic dairy, different varieties. But each one of those things has its own specific market. Organic dairy and dairy have their own market. Organic corn, non-GMO corn, plain old number 2 yellow corn, different markets. Within those markets, homogeneous product. So number 2, we can check off. We'll go down here to number 6, perfect information. You might say, look, I can drive in any direction from Lincoln and go from one farm to the other and say, well, they're not all the same. They clearly don't have the same information. But they do. They just don't use it. If the university comes out with a new study, it's free for anybody to read. Whether they read it and how they use it is up to them. So we can check off perfect information. No barriers to entry and free entry and exit are kind of the same thing. And they're the ones that are probably the hardest to wrap your mind around. If you want to produce produce, food that humans eat, and sell it at a farmer's market, you can do it in my backyard, in which case there's really no barrier to entry. But if you want to produce commodity corn, you need lots of land, expensive machinery. You've got to pretty much invest your life in that. So the barrier to entry there is scale or a financial barrier. But what there is not is there is no licensing, there is no special qualification, there's no discrimination between who gets to perform heart surgery and who doesn't. Okay, so thank God doctors like me can't produce heart surgery. We're worthless. All we can do is give lectures. Okay, so no barriers to entry. Yeah, there are some, but they are not substantial hurdles necessarily. Free entry and exit, we can get around that one too, because I think about free entry and exit as a decision as to should we produce more or should we produce less or should we produce something completely different. So while commodity production and farming isn't going to fit this model perfectly, it's our best example. So that's one way that we can understand this. Okay, and then we have this idea of price takers. Price takers just means if you want to sell your product and you haven't done any marketing or hedging or anything like that, you must take the market price if you want to sell. Doesn't mean you have to, just means you can't manipulate the market. And because your product is identical to everyone else's, you can't say, well, mine's better. Sorry, there is no way to determine the difference. Then that dovetails into zero economic profit, which is point number 3. And we'll do point number 2 first. All right. My favorite 90s basketball player is probably Shaquille O'Neal. More for his personality than his basketball. His nickname, self-imposed, was the Big Aristotle. And he's a Renaissance man of sorts. I may or may not have owned one of his rap albums. In addition, he was a police officer. He sells car insurance. He's on TNT. He does all sorts of stuff. But let's look at Shaq's career while he was playing basketball from a standpoint of profit. So let's say in the off season, Shaq produces a record. He is the artist, he does the production, he does everything. And the revenue that he receives from record or album or CD sales, that's what MP3s used to be on, is $1 million. And Shaq's expenses are $900,000. That means that Shaq's profit is $100,000. Should Shaq continue to sing in the off season? Well, if you know anything about Shaq, he stopped doing that. He had a resurgence later in his career, and then it went downhill again. But one of the issues of being 7'1" is that it's kind of tough on your body. Humans aren't necessarily made to be 7'1". So as Shaq gained weight and got bigger and bigger, his back and his knees hurt, and he realized that this $100,000 profit came with too many costs. He had to think about the implicit cost of, if he goofs off in the off season and has a buffet every night and is singing, he's going to put on weight, and that will shorten his NBA career. So he looked at this profit and said, nah, that's not enough. In Shaq's mind, he was thinking of the opportunity cost of what could he be adding to his career. If he's using that time to work out, perhaps he could add another $5 million season and another $5 million season that he gets paid to be an NBA basketball player. So that's one way to think about profit in a little different way. We've only looked at profit from an explicit standpoint. We've just kind of jumped into it. Okay? Let's say that you have an opportunity to go work somewhere else. You inherit a farm. That's what some of our problems are about this week. You inherit a farm, and they show you the books, and nearly every year, revenue is $1 million, and expenses are $970,000, which leaves a profit of $30,000. And their books are complete, they're accurate, they follow accounting guidelines, matching up expenses and revenues, and there's $30,000 left every year. And oh, by the way, the farm is in Mississippi or Georgia, somewhere in the South. You've got to move. And this $30,000 is really what you're going to make. All the variability in farming, for whatever reason, is gone. It's just a business. Most of you would say, you know what, I'm really not interested in that. Yeah, there's positive profit, but if you're going to uproot yourself and move somewhere that you may or may not want to go, you might say, well, I really need to pay myself a normal profit of $80,000, which puts me $50,000 in the hole. Or you might say, I'm giving up the opportunity to farm somewhere else and make $80,000, or I'm giving up the opportunity to take a job somewhere. My normal profit, my fair return, is more than $30,000. Instead, if we think about normal profit being above the line, we say, well, our expenses are $970,000 plus a fair return, and you think a fair return for whatever reason is $80,000, my total expenses are $1.05 million, which leaves me a profit of $50,000. Okay, so that's how we can think about normal profit being a cost. But we have to do a little bit of market analysis to understand zero economic profit in the long run. You guys are all of the age that you should know what a fidget spinner is. Fidget spinner was this plastic thing with bearings that you could spin on your fingers or on your fingertips or what have you. And the market for fidget spinners initially had them between $5 and $10 for this kind of typical fidget spinner. And if you were a firm that was making fidget spinners, and here's this marginal revenue at $7.50, and here's your marginal cost curve and your profit maximizing quantity, and perhaps this is your average total cost curve, and here's your average variable cost curve. This leaves lots of profit because our average total cost curve is going to include normal profit or a fair return. It's going to provide you compensation for what you're giving up. So if this is the quantity, we can pretty easily calculate what profit is. Graphically, it would be this rectangle. That's total revenue, price times quantity. So if we're making 1,000 fidget spinners and the price is $7.50, our total revenue is $7,500. And our total cost, we just go to average total cost, maybe that's $4. Our total cost then is 4 times 1,000, is 4,000. And we have $3,750, $3,500 of profit left over. And this is economic profit because this $4 has got a fair return baked into it. Well, we know that the price of fidget spinners went down. When fidget spinners first came out or shortly thereafter, my daughter started asking for one, and when they're $7 to $10, like, heck no, we've got way too much junk in the house as it is. But a year later, we were at a co-worker's church's festival, and they were giving fidget spinners away for free. They had advertising on them, so someone had paid for them, but my guess is that they had paid $1 or less. Well, what had happened was there's free entry into this market. So supply increased, and that drives the price down. And in this case, maybe it's driven the price down to, we'll make it $3.50. Well, at $3.50, can we make money? Well, we're not going to shut down in the short run because our minimum of average variable cost is maybe $3. But we're not going to produce in the long run. We're going to leave this market, and that's going to cause the supply to shift back. So when prices are higher than the minimum of average total cost, firms enter the market. They say, I want a piece of that pie. But if that drives prices down, then my least cost-effective firms leave the market because they're losing money. So we have this balancing act between the minimum of average total cost, just slightly up above and below, because we have free entry and exit. If there's zero economic profit, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily a bad thing. That just means you're getting a fair return. Some years there will be a better than fair return, some years there will be less than a fair return. But what it does mean is that if you're doing something and making decisions in such a manner that it's driving economic profit every year, other firms and farms and ranches are going to figure that out as well. So it provides incentive for firms to continually innovate and be on top of the market and decision making. All right, cross your fingers and hope that this downloads this time, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.